allowing myself to receive was a very foreign concept. It's not to say that only men have masculine energy, only women have feminine energy. We have the ability to access both within us. Polarity is when both of those are in harmony.
Today's guest is Emily Freeman, a dating and love coach who empowers ambitious men and women to go from confused to confident in their love lives. Her mission is to help people stop focusing on surface level tactics that don't work, and instead attract their dream partner authentically and actually have a marriage that's thriving and full of love by understanding relational dynamics.
If you do feel a sense of fear when you notice someone else in their core wound, it's okay, because likely it's because it's also triggering yours. And it'd be hard if you're an efficient person, you're like, but I already know the solution. And like, if they could just get on board. And if what feels familiar is shame, blame, or not being accepted, well, that's what we're gonna keep coming back to until we switch it.
Emily, welcome to this conversation today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. And I think this is a topic around dating and communication that there's a lot of tactics and surface level stuff, but something that makes you unique is you approach this from like a very deep personal transformational level that ends up happening to attract and create good external circumstances. So kind of introduce yourself and your background and the work you do. And then I have a number of like important topics I want to cover that like I'm personally interested in. So
amazing.
Please kick it off.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to be here with all of you. I'm so excited to be on the show. And I am Emily. I'm a dating and attraction coach who empowers driven men to go from confused to confident in their love lives, and some women as well. And my story really started, it's a lifelong story, but I ended up doing the work that I am doing now because love didn't come easy for me. And it was a journey that allowed me to discover parts of myself that I always wanted to hide from. And that's the amazing gift of relationships, is they will reflect back to you again and again and again, where you don't have wholeness until you're willing to create that wholeness within yourself. And so here I was, long story short, in my late 20s, after 2 back-to-back relationships left me completely heartbroken, the lowest self-esteem I've ever had in my life, thinking I was going to be alone forever, that there was something wrong with me. And I found thought work. And I started recognizing that just because I think it doesn't make it true. And I think that's sometimes hard, especially for very intellectual people, is to recognize, okay, no, that's not necessarily universal truth. That is a thought that I'm having, and I get to choose my thoughts. And so it opened up this whole entire new world for me to recognize that I could create the life and the feelings that I wanted to experience simply by looking at my belief system. And that started the journey. The journey did not end there. I got back out into the dating world, now feeling more confident than ever, because here I was really experiencing this empowerment around getting to choose the reality that I lived in internally, right? But then I started dating, and 1 or 2 dates in, end. 3 dates in, end. 3 months in, end. And I started to recognize that getting into a relationship wasn't as easy for me as it had been in the past. In the past, it was, oh, I'm in a new relationship, and now I'm in another new relationship. And so the first thing I did was I started following dating coaches online and started looking up information of how I could become more attractive to men. What's the right thing to say? What am I saying wrong? What am I doing wrong? Why do I feel like I'm wrong? And I was able to learn a few different tactics and tricks of how to text men and what to say and how to update my profile, which can be very important pieces of understanding, one, how the opposite gender, if you're in a straight relationship, communicates and what feels good to them, and how it feels for them to receive you or to be received. But that's not where it stops. And so here I was getting more attention and more positive feedback, but still not in the relationship that I desired, and still attracting men who just weren't showing up for me. And so I realized there was a deeper level of work, and it was a feeling of recognizing that there was a deeper level that kept me up at night, right? Like, what is under there? What is going on? What am I going to discover about myself? What do I need to know? What do I need to change about me, right? There was still this narrative of there's something that needs to change about me. And so finally, I decided to take the leap and look under the covers. And I'm sure you know this, but the moment you look under the covers, you're like, oh, that's okay. It's okay. Like, I'm human, and that's a part of me. And that's when you start to actually learn how to give yourself love and compassion. And it isn't until that point, though, of being able to give yourself that love and compassion that you can actually receive it from somebody else. So through this entire journey that I've gone through and learning not only about attraction principles, but also about, attachment styles and understanding our subconscious programming around love and how we continue to relive stories that we created in our childhood through our relationships to try to heal those experiences, and recognizing my own patterns, I started recognizing patterns in others. And then I started diving into masculine and feminine energies and how do we create polarity and what does that look like, especially as a female entrepreneur, as a very driven woman. The idea of allowing myself to receive was a very foreign concept. It felt very out of control. And so that was a whole other challenge that I really took on and started to embody. And so in the work that I do today, I help men, and of course women too, do the same thing, to really develop that relationship within themselves so they can have one with somebody else. Because the very things that we don't want to see within ourselves will continue to be reflected back in relationships. And whether we do something to self-sabotage that relationship and push that person away as soon as those parts of us come out, or we run because we don't like that reflection that we're seeing, we will continue to relive those same experiences. So it's not enough to know how to just talk to a man or a woman. You have to understand how to talk to yourself too.
Love it. Powerful. I want to cover all of those topics in this conversation. What I want to reflect back is my initial understanding. It's this process of self-awareness, which I think has been described in many contexts as like looking at our shadow, especially those parts of us that we don't want to necessarily consciously acknowledge, is necessary for us to get to this point of self-love and compassion so that we can actually interact with somebody and give and receive love in this way. And if we don't do that work, we're going to end up having these sparks and tensions with any partner, could be romantic, but also with our closest friends and family, that is revealing these wounds or just aspects of ourselves that have not been acknowledged. And that's okay because that's part of the healing process. But if we want harmony, we need to do the inner work. Okay. Awesome. Now, I also want to make the promise here too, for everyone listening to this, whether or not you're in a stage of your life right now where you're considering like dating and attracting someone else, or if you've been in a long-term marriage, but you feel like things have gotten a little stagnant, like the stuff you're going to learn here is going to help you recreate some healthy polarity, or just be able to take some internal work, even if your partner's not receiving you in a well way, to start to make some changes. So let's talk about this idea of polarity. We've thrown this word out a lot. Like, what is sexual polarity? What does it work between genders, but also like within ourselves?
Yeah. So polarity, of course, is the opposition of two things, right? And in this case, we're talking about the opposition of masculine and feminine energies, right? Our sacred energies. And we all have both within us. So it's not to say that only men have masculine energy, only women have feminine energy. We have the ability to access both within us. Polarity is when both of those energies are met with one another in harmony, right? So an example being, if a man is core masculine energy and he is leading the dating process, meaning he's not only initiating dates and communication, he's also leading the conversation deeper. He's also allowing her to be seen and heard in a way that shapes the relationship, right? And she's able to then receive that and be in his structure, be in that safe space of his leadership. Then she's able to relax back into her feminine energy, into a space where then she can be playful and flirtatious and open. And this is where I see a lot of men get confused in the dating process, women also, is men think that they have to create flirtatious energy, so that they have to create this sort of feeling of sexual chemistry between them and a woman. But that's not how it works. You can't force that feeling. What you can do, though, is allow yourself to be in your masculine energy, to actually step into it. So a woman who's in her feminine energy creates that flirtatious energy naturally, because feminine energy is where play and flirtatiousness happens, right? So to be in your masculine and try to kind of like logically force that piece is not going to work. And that's also where a lot of men end up disconnected from their own feminine energy, because they get stuck in their head. They're overthinking what to say, what to do. They're trying to control the situation, which is actually wounded masculine energy. And that polarity can't build. So polarity is really when the two are in harmony. And on the flip side, there's a lot of women, I know this was me at one point in my life, that have a really hard time getting into their feminine. Our society is not really set up for that to be celebrated in men or women. And so what happens is when women aren't trusting of the masculine, they've been hurt by it, whether it be in their childhood, through relationships, or likely both, they aren't able to receive him or his leadership. They want to control, they want to push back. And it's not to say that you don't have a voice if you're a woman in a relationship. But it's more about allowing that polarity to build between the two of you to create that harmony. And then sometimes it flips. Sometimes you as the woman are in your masculine and he's in his feminine if he's going through something and needs your reassurance and that structure for him to be able to just be held, right? You can also do that in your feminine energy too. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. There's a lot to that question around polarity. But I would say polarity is really when the masculine and the feminine are in harmony. They're able to do that little dance together, and it creates something very electric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Electric dipoles, I mean, it's kind of like even like a physics principle. Yeah. But I also think like there's life stressors and logistics that can like make those things like depolarize, right? So what are some questions that someone can ask themselves, maybe first from the lens of a man listening to this and then a woman, to assess if they're in a strong, healthy internal polarity or if they're actually in a wounded expression of that, and like vice versa. So some self-assessment, reflection concepts for someone. And as you listen to this, start to think and reflect on like where you feel like you're at with these poles, like maybe now in this point of your life, but also in past slices of versions of you. So please ask those questions.
Yes. So first, let's define masculine and feminine energy for anyone who's not familiar with what they look like, right? So masculine energy is the doing, leading, analyzing. It's the decision making. So when you're in your masculine energy, using logic and reason comes really naturally. You're able to create that structure. It can sometimes be formulaic, but not to a fault. Wounded masculine energy, though, is aggressive, right? So healthy masculine energy, one thing I forgot was it's assertive. So it's very boundaried. It knows where it's going and what it wants, and it has the confidence to go after it. Wounded masculine is aggressive, it's controlling, it's overly competitive, it is emotionally shut down, emotionally unavailable, right? Completely out of touch of your emotions, not even being able to really pinpoint what they are. That's a lot of the times when men then feel like they're always angry or pent up because they're very disconnected from their own heart and their emotions. Their feminine energy is out of balance. And then the feminine, so healthy feminine energy, as I said, it's playful, it's nurturing, receptive, it's vulnerable in a really beautiful way, it's heart-centered, creative. So you can think about masculine as where we build and develop, and the feminine energy is where we create and we flow and we can have more imagination to things. Feminine energy is also radiant, right? When you see a woman or even a man in their feminine energy, you're drawn to it. It feels so open, so free. Wounded feminine is people-pleasing, right? It's insecure. It relies on others for affirmation. So you can see, as a man in the dating process, if you've been people-pleasing, if you have weak boundaries, if you are allowing others to dictate who you are and what you like, and you're trying to be agreeable with somebody, you're actually in your wounded feminine. So of course, a woman who's then in her healthy feminine energy is not going to feel polarity with you because she's looking for that strong boundaried structure. So the way to kind of orient yourself to your own energies, I love this because this is something that I played around with a lot when I first started understanding polarity and the masculine and feminine, is going, okay, what energy am I in right now? Like, I could tell in my business when I was in wounded masculine, and I'd be so clenched and everything would feel overwhelming, but at the same time it was like, nobody talked to me, like it was so rigid. And even times when I was younger, I recognized when I was in fitness, like if someone asked me to miss a workout, it was like, nope, gotta do this. I'm on a regimen, like this is what I'm doing. And I think a lot of the times in our world, we're actually praised sometimes for that behavior and celebrated, but in the end, it's actually hurting our ability to connect with ourselves and to connect with others in a way where we can have those boundaries, like, oh, I did schedule my workout and I do want to stay accountable to that commitment that I made to myself, but I also want to make sure this person feels like I related to them in some way, right? And that's the balance of the two. So one way to start to get in touch first with understanding if you are in wounded or healthy energy. And if you have been in wounded energy for a very long time, this might take a little bit of practice, so just be patient with yourself. But the first step would really to ask yourself, okay, do I feel shut down, closed off, rigid, contracted, right? Or do I feel like I am really in my flow, like I'm in that pocket, I'm in the place where I can expand and grow and be the best version of myself? Do I feel empowered, right? So that's the first step to understanding, am I coming from a place of fear and scarcity, which would be wounded energy, or am I coming from a place of abundance and expansion and excitement, right? To then understand if you are in masculine or feminine, you can ask yourself, okay, does this feel more like structure? Does this feel more like I'm using logic and reason? Or does this feel more like I'm in flow? Am I wanting to have a little bit more flexibility in what I'm doing? Or am I feeling more playful and open? You can do this and start to play around with what it feels like to be in different energies by also doing embodiment practices. So some embodiment practices to get in masculine energy is anything that's going to create more structure or discipline for yourself. So it can be starting a morning routine and saying, this is what I'm going to be doing every single morning, and I'm going to hold myself accountable to it, and I'm going to do it. Other men love to just get outside and get really primal and, be shirtless in the wilderness, and that allows you to also tap into that side of feeling really grounded within yourself. As far as feminine energy goes, anything like dancing, art, playing, allowing yourself to just sing and be in kind of like artistic play mode is going to get you in feminine energy. Now, something like meditation or breath work can do either. So it's really about your intention for it. And so if you are doing more of a guided meditation that allows you to expand and see and create, obviously that's going to get you in more feminine energy. Meditation, as far as, meditating to get really solid in yourself and what drives you, can get you into more masculine energy. Now, I would say meditation, in my experience, though, not to go off on a tangent, but it's a great tool to just get into balance between the two also, and not necessarily cultivate one or the other. So if you're feeling like you're out of balance and it's a little like you're clenched and you're not sure what energy you're in, but you know it's wounded, then meditation can be a great tool to allow yourself to expand back and go, okay, how do I want to be right now? That's part of it. It's always a choice. You can choose. I could choose right now to be like, okay, now I'm going to go into my feminine, and now I'm going to be in my masculine.
And that would be the ideal scenario, right? Insofar as we have these energies within us, we can use them and deploy them tactfully. Amazing day would be like your morning routine, you shift into directed masculine energy, but then you're in the presence of like the flow of it and enjoying the feminine. Sure. Maybe in work, you're shifting from different things. You have a meeting with somebody and there's a lot of feminine reception, and then you're creating some kind of strategy or plan, masculine. So I think the promise is here, with more self-awareness, we have the ability to play this wider range of our aspects, and also to do the healing first off if we feel like we're on one side of the spectrum. Yes. And so everyone, hopefully you're starting to think about where you're showing up on that and what you might start to do based on how to create more balance. So I think for a lot of masculine driven guys listening to this, regimented fitness, regimented meal plan, maybe there's like more open space and like play over the weekend, like doing stuff with your kids without agenda, getting a more creative, expressive hobby. And for women, if you feel like you're not as directed, maybe it is getting more structured into the program. So ideas. I want to keep on going because we have a lot to cover. Let's talk about like attachment theory, because my understanding is a lot of these energies actually get created and expressed and mirrored through our parents. And like in a healthy expression, we would be able to like experience healthy masculine, healthy feminine as kids, and then we integrate those, but like life is a lot messier than that. Like, let's talk about what attachment theory is, how that relates to our childhood experiences, and like how it shows up in terms of like what we expect or look for in relationships and how we give ourselves love.
Sure. So attachment theory is another, I don't know if black hole is the right word, but we could go really deep into it. Attachment theory really focuses on how we are able to give and receive love based on how we interpreted how we would be loved or unloved as a child, right? So there are 4 main attachment styles. There's anxious, avoidant, fearful avoidant, and secure. So a person with secure attachment would be able to experience intimacy and allow it to flow, right? They are able to handle conflict and feedback. They're able to really experience closeness without any sort of disruption in it. Someone with an anxious attachment style is going to have a subconscious fear of abandonment. So someone who has more anxious tendencies, I like to use the word tendencies versus style, because in my personal experience and with my clients, you can sway in and out of each one depending on who the partner is and what's being activated at that time. So all 3 of the anxious, avoidant, fearful, avoidant can all be considered insecure attachment styles. So if you are anxiously attached, or you have anxious tendencies in dating and relationship, you tend to believe that you are the problem, right? So that there is something wrong with you. You are unlovable. At a certain point, you are going to be abandoned. And so this can develop when in childhood you had inconsistent caregiving. Now, that's not to say that your parents didn't do their best or didn't love you, right? We all do our best with what we have, but for some reason their capacity was only to give you what you needed from the lens of a child, not an adult, right? Which we internalize things very different as a child. That allowed you to sometimes feel safe and feel loved, and sometimes you didn't. Now, I think it's an important note to recognize, though, that your temperament can also create different interpretations of your parents' love, right? Like my brother and I have very different attachment tendencies than each other, same parents, right? So if someone's anxiously attached, they have a subconscious fear of abandonment. They are going to worry that there's something wrong with them. They're going to get into relationship, always want to search for affirmation, always be on the lookout for someone leaving them and signs of being left. And ultimately, each attachment style, as you'll see, creates their own fulfilling prophecy in the end, because when you have certain stories, your stories reflect your reality, or your thoughts create your reality. And so we're continued to face the same problems with different partners or in the same relationship over and over again. Someone who has an avoidant attachment style or avoidant tendencies has a subconscious fear of intimacy, so a subconscious fear of closeness. So they are concerned, they have a subconscious fear that their freedom is going to be taken away in relationship, whatever freedom means to them, right? And likely this came from a number of different scenarios when they were younger, whether it be they were super independent and learned that independence is good. So someone with an avoidant attachment tendency actually takes pride in their level of independence and looks down on others who seem like they need other people to feel a certain way. And so they feel like other people are the problem versus themselves. So when they get into partnership, they at a certain level of intimacy, right? At the beginning, they'll really pursue somebody. If they're a man or if they're a woman, they'll want to get in really close, really quickly, as if they are, more secure, anxiously attached. Sometimes if someone has a lot of avoidance, they can appear avoidant from the get-go, but it can appear like someone who's securely attached or someone who's even anxiously attached in the beginning, but when a certain level of intimacy happens, when a certain level of closeness happens, their attachment system will be activated and they will start engaging in what's called deactivating strategies. So this is looking for little flaws in their partner to make sure that like, okay, well, I have an out if I need to get out. Like I can pinpoint all these different pieces of what might not work for me, or starting to get really focused on things outside of the partnership and leaving very little time for the partner themselves, which of course then, their partner feels neglected, their partner asks for more of their needs to be met, and then their story of, I can't fulfill anyone's needs, people are too needy, I'm gonna lose my freedom, gets fulfilled, right? Someone with fearful avoidance will have tendencies of both anxiously attached and avoidant, but they have a subconscious fear of rejection. So this can look very different in that once they are in a relationship, because they seek safety in relationship, but they also feel like relationships are unsafe. So they feel like there's something wrong with them, and also that someone else is going to hurt them as well. So it can be a really hard dynamic to have. And so this comes from them when they were younger, always trying to go to a caregiver or somebody for safety, but feeling rejected in the moment of needing that caretaking. And so what happens in relationship, they get into relationship, and then as soon as they're there, they're looking for signs of rejection, and they will try to reject their partner before they're rejected. So that's where the sort of avoidant pieces can come in, where they find flaws in someone else, they're pointing out reasons why they should leave, why their safety or freedom or whatever it is threatened in that partnership. So that's attachment theory in a nutshell.
That was a great breakdown. I think is like, I'm reflecting on this, like I can see these patterns modeled in both myself and past behavior, also people I might look at. And I think the instant reaction is kind of like, whoa, like that's eye-opening. I know the person that fits that exact pattern, or that was me, or that was my mom, or even one of my kids. I think I want to say the first instinct that might be to judge or define, which is natural for the mind. I think it's important to take a step back and actually embrace all of this with compassion, in the sense that we're like all human on this experience. Yes. These things emerge because of the impressions of our early childhood experiences, and then we're all here in a deep sense to help each other heal, first by becoming aware, and then by also like allowing people to have their experience. Like we can see what's up, but not like rejecting it as bad, but just being with them, being with ourselves with compassion, right?
Yes. When I actually first learned about attachment theory, I felt relieved. So I was like, oh my gosh, all of the irrational behaviors that like felt irrational to me in dating actually had a label to it. There was a reason why I could be so confident in all other areas of my life and feel secure. And then as soon as I'd start dating somebody, I would be an anxious mess, right? And so to me, it was actually a little alleviating, like, oh, okay. And that means other people out there feel the same way. Yeah. And it also explains why, if you have been in a relationship where you've been blaming yourself for a certain dynamic, that you can see like that's actually not helping, right? Yeah. That it's not just you in a vacuum. It's not just that you're wrong or you're bad. Like the dynamic that you're experiencing in dating or in partnership is just imbalanced.
So what can someone do? Let's say they've listened to this so far and they have the sense that I fit one of those categories, or my partner, I think, fits one of those categories. Like, what do you do with this information practically to start to heal and make improvements?
Yes. Well, that is a process. The first step is always awareness of our patterns and starting to understand how they've affected our relationships or our dating patterns in the past. So taking an inventory of the dating patterns that you've had or the relationship patterns that you've had, first to look within yourself. I think it's really important that we start there before we go to another, because we can see how we've played a part in it and take ownership, not blame, right? But ownership is empowering. Feeling like it's all the other person feels disempowering because you can't control another person, but you can change the dynamic of a partnership. So the first step is to look at, okay, how have these patterns showed up in my relationships? What does this look like? A really important piece of that then is to go a level deeper and go, what thoughts and beliefs do I have about myself, love, dating, relationships, men, women, that are creating these behaviors, right? So looking at what are called limiting beliefs. And limiting beliefs can be tricky because they can be very hidden, because we all have confirmation bias, which tells us that because we think something, it's true. And then we find evidence again and again and again for its truth, right? So if you have a belief that I'm wrong, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, and you keep getting broken up with, or your partner keeps telling you that you're making things difficult, well, that's more evidence to the story you have, and so you clamp down even tighter on it. So it's important to recognize that that feeling of like I've been doing things wrong is actually just a belief you have, and you can change that belief to change the circumstance. So looking at the thoughts that are related to the behavior patterns, I think it's really important to do both. Yeah. You can't just look at the behavior and expect the behavior to change, right? That's glossing over, that's putting a Band-Aid on it. You have to also look at what thoughts do I have about this area of my life and about myself that are creating those behaviors. Yeah. And then you feel empowered to go, okay, I can start changing the thoughts. Yeah. From there, it's really about understanding, okay, well, where did these thoughts first originate? Because we inherited our thoughts. We weren't just born with thoughts, right? I mean, we are, but the belief systems we have are inherited, which means if we don't want them to be ours, they don't have to be. Mm-hmm. We can let them go back to where they came from, mm-hmm. right? And allow ourselves to release that as our truth, right? We can change it. Mm-hmm. So understanding, okay, what patterns, how did this come up in my life, to then be able to say, okay, that's not what I want, that's not serving me. I can also see that it's not serving my behavior. So then you can start releasing the thoughts, actually changing them. Now it is hard to go from a disempowering thought all the way to an empowering thought if you have feeling like you're wrong and bad and telling yourself you're the most amazing person and you're loved no matter what is probably going to feel a little bit like hokey. So I always have my clients go through a process of first finding neutral thoughts. Mm-hmm. So neutral thoughts around, let's say, okay, I'm never lovable, I'm always left. Okay, well, a neutral thought would actually be, no, actually, I've been in multiple long-term relationships where people have wanted to be in relationship with me. So that's actually not necessarily true, right? Yeah. And so finding that neutral thought to diffuse the charge that we have around our certain beliefs about ourselves and dating and relationships, which are very, very charged group of thoughts. They're very personal. So that would be like the starting point for all of that. And of course, then actually embodying the work and going, okay, what would the secure version of myself do in these moments?
Yeah, that's a powerful question.
Which is a really easy question to ask yourself and not always easy to apply in the moment. So like you mentioned, coming back to self-compassion, and radical honesty with yourself too is always going to be key. I like to say, you want to have radical honesty with yourself as well as radical compassion and radical ownership. Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful trifecta. Mm-hmm. I also think in my life, like looking back to that whole look at the roots thing, it can be helpful to like understand like the narrative story of where this emerged from. If it was a parent and you feel like you never had a good relationship, if you're a man, you never had a good relationship with your mom, for example, and there was like a wounded like aspect of receiving the feminine, and then you had different attachments that expresses, just understanding that there can be a degree of freedom. And I would say if there's people in your life that you've had charged relationships with that you still have some forgiveness to do around, there's someone you're still holding charge on from your past, there's a very good chance that is like the thumbprint representation of like where the wounded energy not maybe started, but also was certainly represented. And in the process of forgiveness, you're also like not just letting go of a judgment of that person, but of the reflected judgment in yourself. So like the past healing, I think inherently affects the present. Yes. Would you agree with that?
100%. And something my coach taught me was what's hysterical is historical. Yeah. So if you're feeling like that big charge around someone in your life who maybe wasn't as as big of a part of your life or as impactful as you think that moment should be, go back a little bit further and then go back again. Even if you've been through a divorce, even if you've been through a breakup and you're like, I can't forgive this person, ask yourself, who is it that you're really needing to forgive, right? Because usually it's a reflection of something that's happened even earlier than that.
And this is a life's work. Mm-hmm. Like this is what one of the things we're called to do here is like create health, which means wholeness, which obviously means our physical health, but our mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual health is the conglomeration of all these things. So this is what we're here to do. And I think our kids too are beautiful reflections for us too, not just romantic partners, but our kids are now new chance to like propagate a healthier impression on this new being. And they're going to trigger us in different ways that we get to heal through them too. So you get to heal through all your most intimate relationships, which is amazing. I want to shift gears and like talk about how to communicate more effectively. Sure. Because yeah, we can feel things and we may have thoughts and beliefs, but like ultimately we need to bring them into expression in a way that is both clear and direct, but also received in the way that we mean it as best as we can. What do you like to teach as like core fundamental stuff on how to help people communicate more effectively?
Sure. So I think it's important to understand first who you're communicating with. Now, we all have a desire to feel seen and heard in our communication. So the base layer of effective communication is to listen, right? You can't communicate unless you're listening to somebody else. Otherwise, you're just talking, right? Talking and communicating, I see as two very different things. And so in order to have effective communication, you first have to learn active listening. So active listening is really being in the moment with that person. You know, if you're a man dating a woman and you are deeply present and grounded with her, or if you're in a relationship with a woman and you are able to sit with her and just allow her to speak and to reflect back to her what you heard her say. You don't have to repeat everything verbatim. You don't need to be taking notes when she's talking, but just to say, I hear that this is, really upsetting for you that, Sandy said this to you at work today. I'm so sorry that happened. You would be amazed at how she just softens in that moment. And she might cry, she might release. That's okay, you don't need to solve it. But allowing her to just be where she's at, and same with a man, right? I think I see a lot of women who see their man wanting to communicate about something, and a woman will actually shut down in that moment and shut him out because it can feel uncomfortable at times for the feminine to see the masculine really open up and break open, because that's your protector, right? That's your rock. And as women, it's so important for us to be able to hold that space for men too, to allow them to have those emotions and realize that that allows them to then be stronger after they process, and knowing that. And so effective communication in both cases is really just starting with listening, hearing what that person is saying to you and reflecting it back to them. Now, if you are communicating about something that is upsetting to you, right, it is important to not place blame. It is important to talk from your own emotional experience. And you can say even like, the story I'm telling myself about what you just did is X, Y, and Z, right? To just acknowledge that that's the story and the interpretation that you had of the event. So that releases blame from the other person, because it's also can be really effective for your relationship to know what your partner's core wounds are, right? What are their core wounding stories? Because you'll start to recognize when they're unable to hear you is likely when you're triggering their core wounds, right? So they're unable to hear you because they're telling themselves, okay, now I've done something bad, I'm wrong, I've disappointed, or there's not enough to go around, or I'm always going to be the problem. Whatever their core wound is, you'll start to notice, okay, I triggered something in them, and then instead of taking it personally and thinking, okay, this person isn't listening to me, you can have compassion and empathy and say, I'm hearing that this wasn't delivered in a way that feels good to you. However, this is still really important for me to also feel heard. And so, how do we come back together in that moment?
Powerful. Mm-hmm. I want to say, because I think the unhealthy expression of the understanding that dynamic is people can use their understanding of someone's core wound as a weapon against them.
Sure.
Right. And that's deep and does the exact opposite of what you want. So let's say that your partner has, let's just say, fearful avoidant tendencies, and you see it bubbling up. You could go right to it and be like, you're being fearful avoidant. You have this issue and this, and that would be like twisting the knife in the core wound, versus seeing how what is not you're perceiving as a rational response or a tough response is actually coming from their hurt. Once you see that out of wisdom, You can embrace them with love and compassion, still stand your ground for what is true, but add softness to the communication.
Yes.
And anytime you have that judgmental, egoic impulse to want to interject something for your benefit, or to do something that is going to hurt the person because it gives you some kind of like reflected temporary feeling of status control or whatever kind of thing there, like that's what the work that we have to do to like observe that, feel that, not judge that we have that impulse, but don't act on it.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's also fair to say that if you do feel a sense of fear when you notice someone else in their core wound, it's okay, because likely it's because it's also triggering yours, right? That's how we mirror back to each other, is we view that as a threat, right? So if someone's feeling like they're not getting their needs met in relationship, but we have a fear of losing our freedom, well, now that's being reflected back to us, like, okay, this person's gonna be too needy for the rest of my life, and oh my gosh, I'm not gonna have any time to do that, they're gonna hold me back, whatever X, Y, and Z stories we have. So you can have compassion for both of you in that moment.
And this is a radical thought that I've adopted that relates to that, is that all relationships are the right relationships, in the sense that they may not be your continued, sustained, ongoing partner or friendship that's going to be the primary thing you're investing in, but we're always attracting and creating these situations that are revealing to us what needs to be healed, or giving us a chance to step into compassion. And I think when we create relationships that are not in this frame of like, wow, it's actually all kind of like working for greater understanding, versus making it adversarial, like this person's the problem and I need to like either fix something or something's wrong here fundamentally. Yeah. You could say something's actually right here fundamentally. We're triggering each other's core healing patterns, and we can choose what to do with that. That may or not be continuing the relationship in this way, but there's greatness in the fact that it's all working together. It's all connected naturally.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Cool. I always say it's all leading you to her, right?
Yeah.
It's all leading you to more awareness, more wholeness, so you can actually find that person where you can have that dream relationship.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the concept of love languages. Ooh. This is something that's come up in many books, and the idea is
a little lighter, yeah.
There's ways for people to give and receive love that we naturally like. Do you see, like, is there a lot of validity in that? Are people like, and talk about that, define what they are, and how we can maybe use this in a sense, if we have this knowledge, to create experiences that are like connected in the way that the people around us like to connect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the love languages are physical touch, words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, and quality time. And they are really important because a lot of the times the way we think we're showing love to our partners is not the way they actually receive it. A lot of the times our partners don't really even know how they receive love, right? And so this is a really beautiful opportunity to get to know each other deeper and to have those conversations around, this feels good to me, this doesn't feel good to me. And now you don't need to have the same love languages to be compatible. You just have to understand each other and love each other enough to want to give the other person what makes them feel loved. And so I joke that I have all of them.
Poor Mike.
Yes. No, I would say that I definitely have a core couple of two. But it's important for you to first understand what your love languages are, because being able to communicate to your partner what you need is really important, because otherwise they're just going to go off their own reflection of what makes them feel loved, or the way they wanted to receive love that they've never had. Right? So they might be projecting their own desire to be affirmed through, words of affirmation by giving you a whole bunch of words of affirmation, but that's not how you receive it. Now, what I see a lot of the times when relationships are forming too, is people give each other the love languages that they want to receive from that other person in hopes that they receive it. And the other person actually feels that energy as gainful intent of not actually a desire for connection, but more so a need for affirmation. So a good example, if like you're starting to date somebody and you're telling him like how amazing they are and how much fun you had, because you're hoping that they'll say the same thing to ease any angst that you might have. Well, now the energy behind that is an intention of affirmation versus connection. So really important to learn your own love languages first, to not only be able to communicate that to your partner, but give it to yourself.
Nice. That's a great answer. My reflection on that is I think that our love languages, although we probably have a primary disposition, that I think is definitely going to be related to our personality, our attachment style, as well as maybe if we have core wounding, like it's all kind of fits there. Like I think a lot of men oftentimes have words of affirmation as a high primary. I think there's stats on that, but I'm not just making that up. But also things can change. Maybe your partner like normally likes gifts, but in a very stressful time, it flips to like acts of service, and you doing the dishes or doing whatever is like a huge way to do that. So I think wisdom in the art of living comes in to be able to like dynamically see these energies for what they are, understand they're dynamically shifting, and move with them throughout periods of life. Yeah, and I mean with your kids too. It could be a great way to connect with your kids by understanding their love languages, because maybe the gifts that you give them aren't nearly as important as spending a full like 1 or 2 days with them, and like that quality time is what fills them up. Okay. Towards the back part of this conversation, I want to talk about attractiveness. I want to talk about it from the lens of, like, let's say there is a married couple listening to this. They've been married for decades. Like, how do they continue to create attraction with one another and keep the spark alive? And also answer it, please, from the lens of someone who is on here who maybe is not in a relationship or used to be married and then wants to start to date, or at least to like create more attraction, feel like they are an attractive individual.
Okay.
How they do that.
So just to clarify, we're talking about how to feel attractive within yourself, or how to have someone else feel attractive.
I think it's both, but like maybe let's create the concept of how to be perceived as attractive,
okay.
and how to create attraction in a relationship.
Yeah. Well, that circles back to our conversation around polarity, and now we have a really good base to go off of. The first step, number one, is to understand in what energy and what space do you feel most attractive, right? And to get really honest with yourself around, am I actually prioritizing this? Of course, if you've been married for a long time, you have children, you have family, you have work obligations, usually the first thing to go is ourselves. And so likely you're not doing the things that actually make you feel good and make you feel attractive and make you, if you're, man or woman, feel strong and desirable. Something that I see a lot of the times with men in dating and in relationship too, is when they don't believe in their own desirability, then what happens is they worry about actually creating attraction or building that polarity out of fear of rejection, right? I hear a lot like, I don't want to be creepy. But that really comes down to a belief in your own desirability, right? A belief in your woman or man's desire in you and their capability to desire you. So first is to start taking care of you and understanding what builds you up, what makes you feel really good, especially if you have been in a relationship for a really long time. The things that we were doing before we got into this relationship, and I see this with clients a lot, is they get the woman, they get the man, they're in this relationship, and then they stop doing the work. They stop getting curious about themselves. They stop taking care of themselves. They stop doing the things that made them attractive to that person in the first place. So coming back to that, because those are the things that fulfill you, that also your partner was attracted to. So starting there, and then it's also looking at, okay, how is my partner playing a role in all of this? Where am I maybe getting myself into my masculine or my feminine energy, feeling really good, feeling really confident, but then feeling rejected or shut down by the other person? And then we can go back to effective communication around, how do I communicate my intentions for this behavior or for my energy, or how I want us to be able to be connected, to then allow the other person to step forward too. It's always trickier if you're in a relationship versus finding a relationship, because that requires potentially a lot of forgiveness, right? To create safety again. So as I talked about in dating, the reason why a woman will feel attracted to a man is actually because she feels safe enough to receive his pursuit. And that doesn't mean that you need to make sure everything's nice and soft for her and people please, right? That's going back to wounded feminine. It simply means that you are consistent in who you are, what you say you want, and take the steps to actually do what you say you want to do, right? And a lot of the times in partnership, we break that. We say we're going to do something, we say we're going to show up in a certain way, and then we don't. Or we made vows and promises a long time ago to be a certain way, and then we aren't. And so sometimes there is that trust, sometimes most of the time there is trust to be rebuilt in that, to allow the other person to feel safe enough to be vulnerable enough to be desirable, right? being desired or desiring another person is very vulnerable. And if you expect yourself to be rejected, it's going to be really painful.
Great answer. I'm also just struck, and this is like kind of more a simple comment on this, but it feels true, how when everyone gets into the dating pool, or if they were dating, most people are trying to exercise or better their physical condition, which obviously has some degree of like, there's a perceived physical attractiveness of this person, has good genes or whatever, but like really it's like this person's in integrity because they're investing in themselves, they're taking care of their body. It displays a lot of traits that are desirable. You have consistency, you care, you have responsibility, a lot of things baked into the body. And so I would say for anyone who's in a long-term relationship where you want to have a spark come back, like insofar as you getting yourself healthier, like I think that's a huge avenue to go into, and you're here inside Fit Father, Fit Mother, so you're doing the right things. And your partner may not immediately come along. And I think that's also got to be okay with a process, especially if you're married. It's like a long-term thing. But if you can do it in a healthy way where they see you stepping into what feels really true and good and powerful and healthy for you, that is a positive effect that will eventually either trigger them to make a choice on what they want to do, or maybe they just magnetically kind of come along. But I think like when I see these, let's just say 70 or 80-year-old couples that are still like really happy outside walking, and they're like pretty lean and look energetic, I'm like, that from the outside looks really beautiful and really successful. So the physical aspect seems pretty big.
Yes, well, I think exercise and taking care of yourself is an act of self-respect, and attraction is built through respect.
Right, that's kind of what I was getting at. Better said than how I said it, but yeah. So to continue this, I still have that question about the person who's listening to this who is, let's just say they're 55. They've been in a marriage before, they're not currently in a marriage. They have some kids, they have a lot of life experience, and like there's still that part of them that although they've been alone, not in a committed relationship, they want to have a partner and they want to get back to dating, but like there's so many questions. Like, I mean, it's a lot to step into dating, especially with all that life experience. Like, what would you counsel someone who like wants to get back in the game, that wants to find a good partner? Like, what are the things they need to like embody, think about? Any words of encouragement? Let's talk about that.
I love this question. I work with a lot of people in this scenario. I work with quite a few men and women who have been in long-term relationships, in marriages, and are now ready to get back out there. And so our modern dating world is a little different than it has been ever in the past. We have a million different ways to meet people, whether it's online or in person. And so it can be rather tricky to navigate. There's a lot of sort of this falsified feeling of options for everybody. And so it's really important, first and foremost, to get clear on what it is that you are looking for and what's going to work for you. And this goes back to your limiting beliefs, right? If you have gone through a divorce and you have children, or you have family dynamics that you think, oh my God, no, how is anyone going to love and accept this? Or you have certain health issues coming up in your life where you're wondering, oh my gosh, who is going to accept this? First and foremost, come back to what you want. You want that love and acceptance. You want someone who understands and supports your circumstances. You want someone who's going to lift you up. So really important to get clear on, where am I making myself the problem, instead of looking at how do I find someone who's going to be, not necessarily, I don't like to say solution, that would have worked really well there, but I don't see another person as your solution, but someone who's going to support you in whatever phase you're in. So getting really clear first on what it is you're looking for, not only from traits and qualities, but that person's values. Why do they go to the gym? Why do they hang out with certain people? Why did they choose a certain career? Why are they invested in themselves, right? What is that underlying reason for everything that they do in their lives? And we tend to forget about that. And, I love the example of, a person who goes to the gym. Two people can have very different intentions for why they go to the gym. So what is the intention that aligns with you or that balances you out? I think a lot of the times we project and think that our partners have to be a mirror reflection of who we are, because that's where we feel safe. But a lot of the times it's the person that reflects a different view that can actually be the best partner for us. But we avoid that because that means more healing. So, Yeah, I would say the first step is to just get clear, because once you're clear on what it is that you're looking for, then you know where to start looking. So, you can ask yourself, where does this person hang out? Where do they spend their free time? What apps would they be on? What would their profile be like? What would it look like? How would it feel to match with that person? How would it feel to communicate with them? Get a really clear vision. I do something with my clients called the vision of partnership, where you're not only describing what this partnership is like, but what it feels like, to connect with that, because we go after what feels familiar. And if what feels familiar is shame, blame, or not being accepted, well, that's what we're gonna keep coming back to until we switch it internally first. So getting really clear on who this person is, how they're going to fit into your life, what that's going to feel like, so then you can pinpoint, okay, where do I actually meet this person? And then you wanna make sure that you are putting yourself out there in a really authentic way that's going to draw in the right type of person. I see a lot of people get on the apps, get online, and they do it out of obligation. Well, everyone else is on the apps, I'm going to get on the apps and I'm just gonna do it. And what happens is they put up pictures that aren't really showing who they are. They hide parts of themselves, meaning you don't need to put a laundry list in your prompts or bio, but show who you are, be open about it, paint a picture. A lot of people don't understand how to set up a profile to actually be attractive to the person that they want to attract also, right? Men and women can view photos and profiles very differently from each other. So it's really important that you're optimizing your profile to meet a person who is going to be in alignment with you. And then coming back to communication, really learning, okay, how do I start communicating with somebody new? Especially if you've been in a super long-term relationship or a marriage, it can be hard to think about really allowing yourself to start, from fresh with a person. I don't want to say from ground zero, because you have so much more wisdom and knowledge at this point that it's going to be a different experience. It's not going to feel like the last time you were dating. And to be open to that, to be open to being a beginner at it and knowing that that's okay. And then it's understanding how to qualify that person, not asking them interview questions, not making a date into an interview, but knowing how to observe their behavior, how to pace the dating process, so that way you're able to open your heart and get to know them. You're not guarded, right? That takes forgiveness work, right? So forgiveness work will be a part of that. But so you can actually get to know somebody without expecting them to show up as you envisioned them. So a lot of people fall for the story they have of somebody versus who they really are. So it's really important that you have a game plan to understand, okay, how do I pace this and get to know this person? So I'm truly getting to know them for who they are, not who I'm projecting them to be. And then it's really understanding, okay, how do I build trust with somebody again? And then being really radically honest and radically compassionate with yourself as you notice potential old patterns coming up. And also recognizing that you now have new tools and awareness to be able to navigate them in a completely new way. But I want to go back to harp on, just before I wrap this up, is that forgiveness piece. If you've been through a breakup, you've been through divorce, there's always a level of trust that's been broken. There can be betrayal. There can be a lot of really painful experiences that you have endured through that, that have hurt you in many different ways. And being able to not only forgive that other person, but forgive yourself is huge. And allowing yourself to grieve, to allowing yourself to really let yourself feel all of the pain and the disappointment of something not working out, because that's how you heal it.
And those things, I can speak personally, obviously through experiences I've been through, those layers of healing get revealed through interactions. You may think you're healed, and maybe you are to the certain degree that you're intimate and connected, but as you engage with more people or more things, stuff comes up, and be okay with that. Final two questions.
Okay.
Question one of two. One is for someone who is married, but listen to this conversation is a lot of light bulbs, aha stuff's going up, and they're the fundamental thing is I want to improve my primary relationship right now. I see that there's dynamics in myself and my partner that make a lot more sense to me and that require a degree of healing. what do they do from this conversation to start to like make that initiation? Like, what is there an initial communication with their partner? Is it like, hey, I see these things, I want to do this? Like, how do they start to get the gear turning in the healing process? You know, the self-reflection, I'm going to say, like, obviously is a huge component, like they're doing that, but now how do we take that into like the interaction of the communication with initiating energy? And it's a masculine question, but like, what do we do, Emily?
Yes. It's always most effective to start with questions. So going to your partner and asking him or her how they feel in the partnership right now. And allowing them to express how they're feeling and not take it personally, to open up the conversation. So it's always easier for someone to receive feedback when they've felt heard first. So going and asking questions, especially a lot of us want to come to the relationship, be like, okay, I've done this work on myself. I have this level of clarity. I've done all of these exercises, and now I'm going to let you in on the plan that I've already created for us, right? And especially if you are the masculine in the partnership, that is such a natural place to go. And I wish that it would also be easier for so many women to receive that and know that it's coming from a place of love. But for a lot of women, it can feel very jarring, right? Around like, wait, something's changing, what's happening? I don't know what's going on. And so inviting her into the conversation to ask her what she's been feeling and maybe what she's been struggling with, to allow her to feel like she's been heard, then, and this goes both ways, allows you then to say, okay, great. And I've also discovered these parts of myself, and I'm starting to recognize those similar patterns in our relationship. Let's talk about a solution together, right? So it's allowing both people to feel a part of the process, not one person coming in and prescribing how it's going to happen, right?
That makes so much sense, because it's ultimately about connection. Yeah. And connection is an invitation that two people are like coming together on, versus a telling or a one-sided thing.
And it can be hard if you're an efficient person, you're like, but I already know the solution. And like, if they could just get on board, then we would be there by now. But that's where patience comes.
Love is patient, love is kind. I think we've heard that before, right? Okay, so maybe there's some truth to that. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So amazing. Yes. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our community got a ton of value as well. You help people professionally with this.
Yes.
A lot of men and some women as well. Yes. If someone kind of has their mind blown right now, totally opened up, trusts you and knows that like you might be someone to help them with a very specific experience they're having, please tell them about how they can connect further with you and explore what you do.
Yes. Well, I would love to get into contact with any of you who are interested in learning more. You can find me, my main channel is Emily Freeman Coaching on Instagram. And on my Instagram, there's also a link there where you can learn about how to work with me. One way to work with me is through my VIP private coaching. So this is a completely customized, comprehensive one-on-one program where I'm by your side daily, helping you navigate these parts of your love life. Other ways to work with me, I have courses, I have group coaching, and so just going to my Instagram page, looking at that link, you can even send me a DM. I would love to hear from you. It's a great way for us to get in contact.
Amazing.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Fit Father Project podcast. If you love what you heard, please rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really helps spread this show to more men who need this valuable info. To watch full video episodes of this podcast and other motivational videos to inspire your training and more, visit our Fit Father Project YouTube channel. It's free and everything's made for busy guys over 40 like you. Visit youtube.com/Fit Father Project to get access to our entire video library. And finally, if you or someone in your life is interested in becoming a fit father or needs help losing weight, building muscle, and living healthier after age 40, then visit fitfatherproject.com, where you can see our proven programs, supplement line for guys 40 plus, and free meal plan and workouts to get you started. This is Dr. Anthony Balduzzi signing off. I'll see you in the next episode.